Germaine, 2 minutes till we go live. And just stay calm. People are more forgiving with virtual. Be natural. I put you on mute, Germaine. Be casual. That's parang from our virtual conferences, really medyo casual the tone that we can take with our attendees, not like a formal conference. So yes, recollect. Okay, I will open it now, right?
Good afternoon, dear viewers and listeners to the first e-panel webinar of Synergy Market Research and Strategic Consultancy. This is the first of a series of expert panel or e-panel webinars that Synergy is embarking on as a way to put at the forefront experts' opinions and consumer insights and have a conversation with them through this webinar series. I'm Germaine Reyes, the CEO of and President of Synergy Market Research and Strategic Consultancy. Welcome to this webinar. I'm going to be the moderator and host for this e-panel. Before I start, please feel free to give us a feel as to where you are coming from. Say hi through our chat button here. We are so excited to start off this series with this burning topic about understanding the potential implications of the ECQ on consumer habits, attitudes, and mindsets. But before that, allow me to give a bit of a background about Synergy. Synergy has been providing management consulting work for companies to develop evidence-based strategies and programs for business growth. We are passionate about understanding customer needs through insighting. And before I introduce our esteemed panel of experts, would like to thank first our partner who has, or our partners who have made this webinar possible. Big thanks to Future Proof, yay, who is our co-presenter for this webinar. Future Proof has been the partner of Synergy ever since we launched our conference, Consumer Insighting and Storytelling Conference, back in 2018. And Future Proof innovates learning experiences. They're the ones behind the Alpha Mentorship Program. We also would like to thank our media partners who have been loyal supporters of Synergy's events. Thank you to Philippine Star and to Business World. If Lucien is watching, hi Lucien. And thank you also to Marketing in Asia, or MIA, for the continued support. Now, on to today's webinar. We all know that these are unprecedented times. No matter how we look at it, we are in a situation when we are all left guessing, what's the end game? When will normalcy be restored? After this social distancing period, will we be back to our old selves and start mingling again? Or will we continue to stay home, do the same activities, and just slowly go back to our old routine prior to the quarantine period? 7 weeks have passed since the start of the quarantine, and we all know that there was an initial shock amongst the business communities, and business continuity programs focused on manpower, cash flow, and operations management. But business continuity also means taking care of our customers. At that time, businesses showed care and compassion to their customers, and we've seen the ads of companies that donated their media budgets to provide food and PPEs to our frontliners, and to help sustain our marginalized sector in our society. Some also extended compassion by also extending their payment period due dates. This is amongst the utility companies, banks, and other companies. And this is to ease the worries of B2B and B2C customers. Now, we are at the stage when business continuity should refer to anticipating our customers' needs to serve them better during this #business not usual days. What could potentially be the after effect of this unprecedented event? A new normal, as they say. And for our customers, will we expect a change in their brand preferences? How should companies prepare or plan given new customer expectations? As new demands emerge, new business ideas can and will rise to answer these calls. And what could these be? These are what we plan to discuss in the e-panel today. With the collective experience of our panelists, this discussion intends to provide insights that will serve as inputs for your planning and programs, which can further be validated and recalibrated after the ECQ. Now, joining us today are 3 esteemed panelists, established thought leaders in their respective fields, who will give their views about the new or changing customers. I had the pleasure of working with them either for inciting work or art conferences and other prospective endeavors. Their collective experiences span marketing, communications, advertising and creatives, digital and social media marketing, strategic planning, anthropology, research, branding, retail, shopping, to name a few, from both the local and global perspectives. All our panelists have worked with various industries in their respective corporate and consulting careers. One of our panelists is joining us from Singapore. Please say hi to Peachy. Hi, Peachy. There, yes, hi, Peachy. So she's currently the Master's Program and Business Director at Hyper Island, Asia Pacific. Prior to Hyper Island, Peachy had a 25-year career in marketing communications, capping this with being the CEO of Ogilvy and Mather. Concurrently, Peachy serves as the Chief Connector and Mission Controller of the Just League, a talent lending bank for fourth sector enterprises. Across her fruitful career, she assumed the many roles, from being an executive creative director to becoming the chief strategist and eventually becoming the managing director for a large advertising company, leading digital transformation across its ranks and client companies. Our second speaker is one of the, did you know this, 100 influencers in LinkedIn. Check him out, Mr. Gino Barromeo. Hi, Gino. He's the VP for Strategy Development and Premier Malls Marketing at SM Supermalls, where he oversees the growth strategy for SM Supermalls, helping guide the development of new malls and expansion projects. He was the Chief Strategy Officer at McCann World Group Philippines, where he had around 20 years of strategy building experience, leading a big team of strategists to provide expertise in brand strategy, social, and digital media and data analytics. Parang kailan lang, Gino, nagkita tayo sa McCann noon. Okay. And last but certainly not the least is our social scientist. If there are data scientists, there's also a social scientist. Miss Eileen Rondilla. Hi, Eileen. Oh, Eileen has a Master of Arts degree in anthropology from the Ateneo de Manila University, where she also teaches anthropology. She earned her BA anthropology from the University of the Philippines. She is a rare anthropologist because she can straddle between business and enterprise, these two worlds, with academe and anthro work. Her breadth of experience encompasses understanding consumers in different verticals via ethnographic research and other anthropological methods to understand the implications of all of what she's able to research on programs and campaigns of companies. She also manages her own outfit, which is Human-Centered Solutions Asia. So just before we start, I just would like to share a few guidelines just to make this webinar more interactive and a learning experience, because that's our objective here. So as a webinar attendee, your microphones are currently on mute by default. And in the event that the panelists get cut, please don't panic, all right? They will dial back into our webinar. In the meantime, we will probably do some question and answer, we'll do that first probably. And they can simply click back on the webinar link. We encourage everyone to ask questions, and please use the Q&A button just to really prime us that this is a question coming from you guys. That's found at the bottom center of your Zoom dashboard. So please raise your questions. We want this to be more interactive. We will refer to this during the Q&A portion. And you can share your comments on the topic. We have enabled the chat function. And just please let us know if you have any tech concerns. Okay, so let's check this. I'd like to know how this works. Please say hi. I'd like to know where each one of you are coming from. Is anyone coming from abroad or far up north or down south? Please just say hi. Drop us a high note there and just let us know where you're coming from. Okay. Okay, so Gab from Supermalls. Hi, Gab. Okay. I'm saying hi also to Gerard there. Okay. So now on to the heart of this e-panel discussion. Here to give us her initial thoughts on this webinar's theme, burning topic, is Miss Peachy Packing. Please take it away. Thank you, Peachy, for your initial thoughts. Please share.
Hey, thank you, Germaine. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And it's so great to be here, even if it's just virtually. Thank you. I have about 10 minutes to share with you my initial thoughts on the topic. But I'm representing a school, and one thing that we practice is we don't give you answers. We teach you how to learn. We facilitate your learning how to learn. So what I have for you this afternoon, and if I will share my screen now, is 3 provocations. So let us provoke you. Let's see how provoke you to think. Okay, so that's 3 provocations, and I'd like to start off with provocation number 1. MIT has published an article that talks about. In fact, the headline was, I didn't know if it was clickbait. I didn't think it was clickbait. It says, we're not going back to normal. So for anyone pining for what used to be, I think we should just say goodbye to that, because what the quarantine has done, what this lockdown has done, is really shake us to our very core, and make us question a lot of fundamental beliefs. But provocation number 1 talks about 2 months on and 2 months off. The assumption is if we do not find a vaccine anytime soon, all we could do is really bring down the number of infections to a manageable rate before we start opening up our worlds, our countries, our homes. And that's what New Zealand, I think, is doing. They have dialed down their alert level from 4 to 3 because they managed to contain it. I think the figure cited there was, if we could keep the number of infections down to below 50, 50 being the threshold, then we can open up. But unless there is a cure, then that means the infections will again resurface and contaminate again. And the only way to address that is to go on 2-month quarantine again. So can you imagine a world that's 2 months on and 2 months off, on quarantine, and 1 month off quarantine? Well, there's a country that has gone off their quarantine, and that's Hong Kong, that's China. And I don't know if you've heard about it, but there's this thing called revenge spending. So all those pent up emotions, those, if you look at Facebook, you will see, what will you do after the lockdown? Ano ba namimiss mo? What do you miss? Where do you want to go after the? So everybody's waiting, like race horses about to go out, run out as fast as they can to wherever it is that they feel they should be. So Hermes in Hong Kong has posted $2.7 million on reopening day alone. That's a lot of bags. And merchants have noted 80% increase. Activity, 80% increase in activity. That's expected, but 50% more footfall. So there are indications of people really just dying to go back out there and spend. But that's the 1 month off. What if it happens, as we mentioned earlier, that then we go back to quarantine? Then what happens then? So can you imagine this cycle, what it does to a person's psyche? It's interesting. It's interesting just to think this through. So the next provocation that I have is new jobs to be done. I don't know if anyone has heard me speak about jobs to be done, or you've heard of the concept of jobs to be done, unfortunately, I can't see my chat window while I'm presenting, so I can't see the questions. Oh, there it is. So if you have questions, just type it in. Jobs to be done are fundamentally what are the needs, the needs, the tasks that people need to accomplish, and therefore reach out to brands and products and services to get those jobs done. We used to have fairly predictable jobs to be done, whether it's a social job to be done, an emotional job to be done, or a functional job to be done. But what this lockdown, this quarantine period has managed to do was give us quiet and time to think and ruminate and to really figure out what is important to you. Well, I guess those who ran off to Hermes in Hong Kong felt like a bag was important to them. But for the others who don't feel the same way they do, they'll start paring down and start reflecting on each and every purchase given the context of being locked down. What good did that designer bag do to bring me either to answer a functional, emotional, or social job to be done? So that's very interesting how jobs will change, how these needs will change. In fact, I'd like you to look up on LinkedIn this thought piece of, I think it's BBH, and they mapped out the new needs and need states that you might want to see and ponder on. So with so much time to ruminate on what's really important, and also this concept of memento mori, reflecting on your mortality, I think people's priorities and motivations will be changed, will be modified dramatically. So that's my second provocation. And the third provocation that I'd like to share is, now we take a look at this frenzy for innovation, whether brands innovate, industries innovate, Silicon Valley innovates, whoever's innovating in the innovation game right now. What it has shown us is, well, Mark Anderson really pointed it out quite clearly, that what it has shown us is no government, no industry, no brand was ever prepared for this. And he asks, so what was all that innovation for? Were we innovating on things that we really didn't need? Because what we really need are even basic things like swabs. And nobody really cared for swabs, but that's what we need. So I think there will be a balance between this shiny new innovation, whether it's a brand innovation, a technological innovation, and what is it that you really need? And maybe this is a clarion call for a relook at what we call is an innovation, because I feel that all the hype and hogwash when met with real human pain is hi Taro, met with human pain is going to separate the actors, the posers, the innovation posers, and those who really add value to human life. So just those three thoughts. I'd like to leave you with that. Those three provocations rather, because I have a thought experiment I've been working on, and it's also, I'm wondering how to turn it into a case for my students at Hyper Island. And here's an interesting thought, and please don't lynch me. But what if there was no more marketing? Not in the way we know it, not in the way we've been experiencing it. No more paid, no more owned, just genuinely earned goodwill and love from our customer. What does that world look like? This is in no way to diminish those who are in the industry. I used to be in the industry, I know the value, but this is a thought experiment. I think the reason why this crisis hit us so hard is because we did not see it coming. we were so blindsided, and we, as Mark Anderson said, failure of the imagination. For those who understand, who recognize the term black swans are supposed to be far and few between. But in my opinion, the black swans are just going to come one after the other from here. So no one is prepared. So really, maybe we have to rethink a lot of things about what we know about marketing, innovation, branding, customer loyalty, and so on and so forth. So those are the things I wanted to share. And well, if you want to know more, or perhaps ask me questions about the stuff I've shared or what it is I do at Hyper Island. Oh, by the way, these are the sources, and you will all be provided copies of the 3 provocations. There's not much because I left room for conversation. Yeah, so thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for listening. So my email address is there. Send me an email if you'd like to talk more. Thank you.
A provocative, highly provocative sets of ideas. Actually, at the start of the quarantine period, we all were talking about, you know, brands providing meaning in whatever they're offering, right? So all the more it has really come into fore, right? And I think for what became apparent is that those brands that are just out there for profit and just selling, I think they will really need to rethink their position and essentially understand it from the customer's point of view. What are the needs right now? Interestingly, I shared this, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and according to Bain and Company, okay, what this COVID-19 pandemic enhanced in terms of the needs would be affiliation and belonging, reduction of anxiety and physical risk. Especially at the start of the quarantine period, I think these are all highly pronounced. I mean, like affiliation and belonging. Who is in the same situation as I am? Like if you're a COVID patient, right? They feel so all alone. So if there are some things that brands can think of these days, how do we alleviate the lives of the COVID patients and everything? Maybe we can have Gino and Eileen also join in the conversation here, and also our participants, please. We would like to ask you to participate in this conversation. Because again, we're all in this together, and we're trying to figure out how to make sense out of everything that's happening. So again, brands providing meaning in the lives of customers, which essentially is really what marketing is for. Sorry, that's my principle, I guess. It's really creating better quality of life for everyone, and not just really just selling a product, no?
Right.
And yes,
I have questions here that I'd like to. There are some from, I think it's Alistair, Jard, Mary Ann, and anonymous attendee. Okay. It says here, what can we learn from countries that have reopened from their quarantines earlier from the Philippines, and how different will their experience be from ours? Oh my goodness. There are so many factors. Just imagine the one constant, it's the same virus, right? It's the same.
yeah. Whether in Singapore or
it's the same way. The major difference is what is the response. So Simon say, what's his name? Malcolm Gladwell says, and I wrote this to the school of my children in Auckland. He says, when you know so much and you still, when you don't know anything and you fail, that is honorable failure. But if you know so much, but you still fail, that is dishonorable failure. And I think you can, we say no judgment in Hyper Island, but you can already make your judgment to see who is responding, who is failing honorably and who is failing dishonorably. And so I guess that's my response. Maybe it's not an answer, it's a non-answer, but I'm asking you to look at it from a different lens. The experience will be based on the response. The response. Of course, there are things that are universally true about human beings, but as far as how different the experiences are, it really depends on a lot of things. I'll just take one more, and then maybe we can move on to the other speakers. You mentioned revenge spending earlier. How do you think that would apply to debt-dependent goods like real estate and cars and other high-priced luxuries? I'm laughing because currently in where I am right now, it's a tiny one-bedroom apartment, and I'm wondering, after this period, should I go out and get myself a bigger apartment so that my husband and I don't pull out each other's hair, because we're like always 6 feet apart from each other.
Just in case there's going to be another quarantine.
Just in case there's another quarantine. Until a vaccine is produced and it is equitably distributed, not like some expensive vaccines that not everyone has access to, we will just be in this cycle. I agree with MIT. So there might be people who will take it as an opportunity to say, hey, I don't want to be cooped up in a smaller house. I think that decision we were postponing, sweetheart, about buying that house or that condo, maybe it's time for us, if we have the money, maybe it's time for us to go and have one, because they're already thinking about the experience that they had currently and saying, what if this happens again? So, but there are different archetypes, there are different kinds of, and Germaine, you would know this, there are different responses depending on, are you control-oriented, are you harmony-oriented, are you whatever you are, and your motivations. And your motivations will largely determine your behavior, your spending behavior. Yeah, I'm sorry, I know there are more questions, but I'll just have to take 2 of those questions and to make way for the discussion and the other speakers.
Actually, I just would like to quickly touch on the 2 months on, 2 months off, right? You're free, right? I just would like to get a bit of an idea, and I will also ask this question to our other panelists. Is there a quick, when companies are going to do their business planning, therefore, they need to plan along the lines of these 2 cycles, if ever?
I love your question, because that's the next module we're going to be facilitating for our students, and it's scenario planning. We have to start thinking different scenarios. As Mark Anderson said, failure of innovation, failure of imagination is the cause of failure of innovation, because we can't imagine so far. We can't imagine. We didn't imagine the unimaginable. That's why I think the 10th man concept of World War Z and the armies, I think people should have 10th men. A corporation should have 10th men, and they're basically devil's advocate. When everybody says we're going this way, someone should be thinking about this horizon, and that's the only way to prepare ourselves. How many times have you heard the word VUCA lately? Volatile.
Yeah. Yes, back. And I think companies cannot really do long-term planning. Even if the quarantine has been lifted, maybe the recalibration of plans will happen, every 2 months or every 3 months.
I retired from the industry about how many years ago? 5 years ago, and even then, we were already challenging the value of a 5-year plan because of things moving so fast.
Yeah, and the digital transformation age.
So it's just moving so fast. So planning things on a 5-year horizon. In fact, McKinsey has a model I read in HBR. It said there are 3 horizons you should plan for, and you should mobilize and invest accordingly. But even that has been debunked, because again, I mentioned the black swan. They will just keep on coming more often. I don't think they should be called black swans anymore. I don't know a good term for this, for them.
Okay. Yes. So thank you, Peachy. So essentially, Peachy provided us with 3 provocations. One would be scenario building, and this may impact on the planning cycle of companies, because we're seeing it from an MIT study that there may be an occasion when 2 months on, 2 months off. Therefore, how do we plan around that? And then the need to reflect on the jobs to be done, which has a connection with brands providing meaningful offers for their customers in the context of their needs now. And also innovating. I think this also dovetails with to be done. Innovations, when we innovate, we make sure that it's something meaningful, and therefore, so that our innovations will not go down the drain. Again, 80% of products fail because there's no specific need that that particular innovation is for, no? All right, so very interesting. We now move to Gino. Okay. Thank you, Peachy, so much. We'll get back to you again. Okay. So let's hear the thoughts of Gino Barromeo on what could be the macro forces that will be impacting on consumer behavior and attitudes. Here to give us his insights on these. Thank you, Gino. Please take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I want to start by saying that consumer attitudes and behavior are things that are shaped by the surrounding economic, cultural, and societal context of the times. And obviously, COVID-19 ticks all those boxes. It's had effects on the economy, on our culture, and how we live as a society. Now, a lot has been said and written about it. So what I'm going to try to do this afternoon is to organize it in 4 themes. Right? After all, that's what strategy people like myself do. We try to imagine, what does this all mean? This is taken from first-hand observations from our business, third-party research, plus our own research internally, and learnings from other markets like China. So the 4 big themes that I'll talk about are, number 1, disrupted supply chains. Second, disrupted sources of income. Third, compromised mobility. Fourth, consumer well-being. Okay, those are the 4 themes that are shaping people's attitude and behavior these days. Now let's talk about the first theme, which is about disrupted supply chains. What is this about? Lockdowns all over the world have affected the flow of goods. And this in turn has affected the ability of people and businesses to secure raw material, components, and ingredients for production. And this is happening both globally and locally. So what does that mean for you as a consumer? You ask yourself the question, where do I now source from? And this covers everything from everyday essentials to work-related goods and services. And so as a consumer, what do? You try to find alternative supply chains for yourself or your business, or you start opening up new ones. And some interesting behaviors have emerged from this theme. So for example, locally, we're now seeing the emergence of local economies more and more. We see people turning to local brands and producers, supporting their own neighborhood businesses. I've seen, for example, the emergence of a neighborhood economy, right? Where people are now both creators and resellers. So for example, I know somebody who was previously a financial advisor, and because of the crisis, he has had to reinvent his job to now become a reseller of small appliances for the neighborhood, right? We see this along with other behavior like pasabay systems emerging in local communities. So the local economy has become a response to the disrupted supply chains. There are many more examples, but that's just one example of how disruptions in supply chains give rise to new consumer behavior. The second theme is about disrupted sources of income. And by income, I'm referring to both businesses and jobs. The lockdown has affected all kinds of businesses, big and small. Now, currently, the vast majority are either not operating at all or they're operating at a loss. Now, in the Philippines, there are 2 sectors that are particularly vulnerable when you talk about income. The first will be MSMEs, so micro and small to medium enterprises. Right now, 99% of all businesses in the country are MSMEs, and they account for an estimated 3 million jobs that are at risk. So if you lose those jobs and incomes get lost, you can imagine that will have a direct effect on consumer attitudes and behavior. The other sector that's at risk are so-called poor quality jobs. And poor quality jobs are People who work either on a daily wage, work on commission basis, or a small basic salary plus incentives. So because the income stream is not as stable, those jobs are also at risk. So as a consumer, that brings about two questions. First is, if your source of income is disrupted, what do you do instead for a living? And then second, if income is in question, what do you prioritize spending on? And so some new behaviors again will emerge from that theme. Let me share with you a couple. The first is, and to echo Peachy's point on new jobs to be done, I think new jobs will emerge and they will be created out of necessity. Because again, if the old jobs aren't viable or cannot be done because of health restrictions, new jobs will emerge. We're seeing this already with people setting up businesses from home. They're selling goods and services digitally, right? Even in companies that have existing jobs, scopes are being redefined. Job descriptions are more fluid once again, okay? On spending behavior, we see things like people doing both economizing and bulk buying. They're not mutually exclusive anymore. People in businesses are now very concerned about managing their cash flow, right? And increasingly we see businesses and individuals converting their quote unquote assets in inventory to cash, because again, cash flow and liquidity is very important these days. The third theme is about compromised mobility. And by this, I'm referring to both physical mobility and digital mobility. Lockdowns have compromised our ability to move around, whether physically through transport and digitally, because the surge in demand has forced a lot of internet providers and service providers to control the bandwidth because they didn't anticipate being able to meet this surge in demand. So as a consumer, it now begs the question, how do you access goods and services and experiences? How do you even explore the world around you when mobility is compromised? And so people now are looking for solutions to help them extend their reach, to help them be more efficient with the time they do have to do their errands and chores. And increasingly what we're seeing is people are finding new ways to extend their reach by either tapping neighborhood economies, tapping digital services, or businesses are adjusting. We're now seeing the rise of businesses trying to bring what were previously thought of as undeliverable services to people. As a concrete example, there's an indoor cycling studio called Electric Studio. So they're in the business of indoor cycling classes. And because those facilities will be closed for the foreseeable future, what they've done is bring the bikes to people either by renting the bikes out or selling. So that the pandemic has given rise to this new way of working around it. So that's just one example of many of how businesses and individuals are trying to overcome this compromised mobility. Finally, let's talk about consumer well-being. Now remember that quarantine life is a sudden adjustment to a totally different way of living. And for most people in this country, we've never had to go through this experience. Remember that 59% of our people are 30 and below. So this pandemic is technically their first big crisis moment. It's their version of World War II, right? And so that brings a lot of change in a very short time. And we're all collectively trying to keep up physically, emotionally, mentally, right? And so as a consumer, you always ask yourself, how do you manage your well-being? And some new challenges are emerging. So for example, Peachy was referring to this. How do you now manage personal space and time in a work from home setup? How now do you relearn spending a lot of time with family members in a confined space? Other people have now been forced to develop or redevelop what I call home trade skills, like cooking, home maintenance, repairs, and things like that. And all of this collectively is taking a toll on our physical health and our emotional and mental well-being, right? So I think if there's an upside to all of this, with new dynamics and new problems will come new opportunities. And I've just mentioned a few, but if you look between the lines, there's a lot going on, a lot of things that people need help with that, businesses and brands can come in and be helpful with. Now, while the picture may look bleak, I want to close maybe with a bit of hope. If people ask me what is the sentiment of consumers looking ahead, I would describe it as cautious optimism. So yes, consumer confidence and optimism has dropped if you compare pre-COVID and where we are now. But if you look at surveys, it's still net positive. You look at the BSP Consumer Confidence Survey, that's what it says. Our own internal research has pointed that out as well. So I don't think people are that depressed that they want to give up on life just yet. Although, yes, they do acknowledge that there will be a normalizing time. And so far, the consensus has been 3 to 6 months of normalizing. Now, one interesting thing I'd like to leave you all with is that while the pandemic has made people more cautious, has made them appreciate the convenience of e-commerce, it's interesting that this has also made people reappreciate that they really enjoy physical experiences much more than they do digital ones. And I think that's an interesting thing to look at. Because while, as an example, 9/11 changed travel forever, there were more security checks and other things like this, but it also did not totally stop people from traveling. And I think the same thing will be seen with COVID-19. It will change a lot about our everyday routines, will leave a lasting scar on us, but I think it will not prevent us from totally living our lives. And that at least gives me a little hope and optimism. That's really it for me. If you want to continue this conversation, please feel free to reach out to me through LinkedIn and other social media channels. I'm very easy to find. Thank you for the time.
Oh, thank you so much for those provocations as well, or some insights that you shared. I actually have a few questions before I turn over the floor to Eileen, but it just got me to thinking. For example, you said earlier disrupted supply chains, and personally speaking, I think people are getting exposed to the suppliers of supermarkets, and I don't know whether that is going to be a continued phenomenon or situation, such that number one, it will contribute kaya to further traffic. Number two, will therefore, and this has implications to the retail shopping, will therefore customers shop less now because it opened up all of these supplier contacts in these times. What is your prognosis in that?
I think assuming that you're confident about your income, I think if anything, it will open up more shopping opportunities for people. Of course, it will just be diverted to more places, but I think it's almost like people's eyes have been open to the possibilities, right? The pandemic has advertently done that for us. And I think it's a good thing for our business and the economy. It will help us bounce back faster. So everybody wins.
And everybody also, parang given the compromised income, everybody now is trying to look for ways to earn a living.
Yes.
The other side to that, or the flip to that, would be we think about brand offerings. There's a question here: will brands matter in the post-COVID world? And I was just thinking, will brands need to rethink their portfolio of brands? And would you be seeing brands dying, and then they need to recalibrate their brand portfolio lineup of brands these days?
I think the short answer to that is brands will still matter. And remember that even in the early days of brands existed because people thought they were buying into some value added in their life, right? I think what's changed, what you mean by value added. Today, you have to be useful, helpful, or supportive because things are a little more challenging today. So if you're a brand who's not helpful, useful, supportive, you'll probably get some backlash from people and you'll probably be left behind. Right? But I think brands do have a role. The role may have changed, but I think the role of a brand matters more than ever in this kind of world.
It's just that probably there will be some shifting as well, that will happen. For the essential products, for example, you probably would have a brand loyalty for a certain, let's just say, toilet paper or tissue, but because of the limited supply, you get exposed to a new set of other brands that you wouldn't have touched prior to the quarantine period. Now you get exposed to this, and therefore, the people are reweighing their choices. So there's that change in or shift in brand preferences. I think that would happen. What are your thoughts on that?
Have reevaluated the priorities. In fact, I want to connect this with some of the questions that are coming up, because I've noticed there's a lot of questions on revenge spending, and I think they're connected. I'll answer that. I think
we wish.
My forecast, I think there's going to be 3 categories, possibly more, that will have some kind of revenge spending. Okay, the first one I think is luxury goods, right? I think those are generally more immune to disruptions economically, but people are pent up with demand, so that's going to happen. The second one, I think, for the Philippines, food. And I think we're going to start seeing it as early as Mother's Day. Remember, people have been cooped up for about 2 months already, and food is the way we celebrate life, and food is what we use to tell us that things are going to be okay. So I think there's going to be some revenge spending there. People are going to indulge on food.
Or some shifting as well, because all of the relief goods that people receive these days are of a certain brand or category, probably after the quarantine period, and that's why these companies need to rethink their brand portfolio as well, because the consumers are so exposed to all of the brands and the specific categories being given in relief baskets,
Yes.
they might want to try
That's
other
it.
types of
People are
canned.
hungry for it.
Yes, yes, for change. Yes.
The last
Other
category, I think, and I think many of the women in the audience will agree with this. I think beauty and personal care will see a lot of revenge spending. There are so many people dying to pamper themselves when all this is said and done. In fact, you'll hear many people say, the first thing I'm gonna go is go to my stylist when this is all done. So I
the
expect
other,
yes,
there, there's a joke there. Nobody will recognize those people because everyone would have white hair
yes, yes.
and long hair and everything when they go out of the quarantine period.
So perfect for revenge spending, for sure.
Yes, pampering. So
Uh,
again, what was that? Luxury products, uh,
Food,
women,
and
food,
then beauty
and
and
yes,
personal care. So ripe for revenge spending.
or pampering, I
Yes.
guess.
of mine just came from the doctor. He brought his son to the doctor because his doctor had a rash, and the doctor
Mm-hmm.
seems like there are only three types of illnesses that come to the doctor right now. It's rashes because it's very hot in the house, so it's very hot. So they get a heat rash. Second is backache because for those who are working from home, yeah, their backs hurt like hell after 8 or more hours on the
Tell me
computer.
about it. My right arm, yeah.
Third one is people are asking for diet pills.
Oh
Yes.
my God.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Fattening the curve nga daw eh, hindi flattening the curve. Oh, one more thing, anecdotally, because I would be asking our team, what categories have you stuck to your specific brand? And these would be baby products, you know. And I think conceptually speaking, like diapers, milk, and what's the other one? Diapers, milk. There's another category, baby category that, you know, talagang they would go to the extent of looking for the specific brand for their water,
Yeah.
water.
And I think
Okay,
they all have
so
something in common, which is these are categories where people put a premium on safety
right,
and trust. So I think with those kinds of
and
categories, people will not gamble.
yeah, and hiyang,
Yes.
because otherwise, puyat, puyat ang abot.
Yes.
Yes. Mm-mm. All right, so I'm excited to hear from our third speaker. Yes. So now looking at the consumer's perspective in terms of their life worlds, would like to hear from Miss Eileen Rondelia on her specific thoughts on what the implications are of the quarantine period on consumers' life worlds.
Okay.
Eileen,
Yes,
take it away, please. Thank
yes,
you.
good afternoon. Ano. It's nice to be participating in this exciting panel. I think my contribution to this panel is to actually bring down this macro level, no? So medyo macro level yung reading niya, no? To describe possible changes, shifts, adjustments in the life ways, no? And I have to emphasize that we need to segmentize our views about consumer because those who are spending on the luxury goods may not maybe those who are spending on the it might be different in the other income segment. So our goal is to actually imagine yung responses of diverse consumers in terms of yung consumption pattern nila, shopping practices, decision making, spending, and expenditure, and we have to be mindful of the diversity. So I will be using the life world model, no? And the life world model is actually a way for us to visualize the life context of consumers, no? So it's like getting a picture or an entry on how their life looks like in an instance or in an event like this that we're all cooped up in our homes for a prolonged period of time, no? So I will be providing some examples and some observations of some consumer behavior that we could probably see, no? But unlike this, these observations are kind of raw, no? So they are based on what we will see in how they are now doing their shopping or consumption practices. No? Um, so in using the life role model, it's actually a way for us to see the context of the people, no, and see ourselves moving into those contexts para we will be able to understand how consumers are behaving at this point. No? One trend or one pattern that we might see is yung parang yung shifting social roles in relation to shopping, food preparation, and household chores, no? So this is a very micro reading on how yung mga big patterns or big yung mga macro level things that we are seeing are probably gaining entry into the life context of our consumers. So for instance, in doing grocery, no. So in doing grocery, this is commonly conducted and supervised by female household manager. So it's usually the mother or the grandmother or sometimes the eldest daughter, no, in some cases who does that, no. So it's very likely that because of an event like the COVID-19 and the quarantine, certain roles, assignments will be disrupted within the household, no? And for some reason, the person who are assigned to do particular roles, in this case, doing the grocery, no, cannot do the go out, no? So for example, the wife is pregnant, or you only need one person to go to the grocery, and it so happened that a female can do the driving, for example, ano. So parang isa lang yung assigned. So like the household head, ano. So in this instance, for example, bigla all of a sudden yung men is tasked to do the grocery, no. So they can do the grocery, but you know, they do not have that yung certain degree of expertise on how to do grocery. Germaine was mentioning kanina yung, let's say, buying stuff for children, that usually the female caregivers are more familiar with or mas alam nila, no. In this shopping context, no, in doing the grocery, the new person assigned can manage the list, all right? So, but how about the decision making that comes when the list is not working anymore, no? And when there will be instances when you need to do a replacement on what's on the list, you need to do a substitution, you need to do a revision of the purchase plan, no? So anong mangyayari in how we are actually doing the grocery if there is all of a sudden a change in the roles that we have, no? So one example that we can see here is how they have done it in Malaysia, no? So in Malaysia, Tesco have seen a lot of males doing the shopping, and they have noted, and perhaps in the Philippines also, we will note that yung mga males na nagsha-shop, ang dami nilang, they have to check on a lot of, they have to call their wife, they have to see kung what's being, ano bang difference ng isang product over the other, no? Okay, so those are parang mga pain points that might come and that might be anticipated in how we might be doing our duties and roles in connection with something like this, no? So what Tesco has actually done to address something like that is to come up with, let's say, a buying guide that will be very useful for other role takers who will do the shopping for them, no? So this is just a case study, but what we would like to ask here is to pose a question on how our role assignments among consumers, what changes will be taking place because of this new way of doing things, and how will that affect consumption habits, how will that affect the category, or how that will affect yung product or brand, you know? So these are just some example, no? So yung household help services, no? So we have noted na, for instance, meron kang mga mga day cleaners or stay out household who come once in a while, no? But there are some villages that have decided to stop this arrangement in the interest of decreasing transmission. So what happens? Who takes the role of those people na dapat yun yung gagawin niya, no? Household services, yung mga work from home and online interactions, no? We are not going out as much as we do, no? So if we are home, no, how are we now going to create or convey an identity and an image to people na very one way? Kasi sabi nga natin, very, very experiential. Ano? Are we going to be spending a lot on clothes, on personal care, or yung mga accessories, or yung mga footwear, personal grooming, ano? So, one of my colleagues have actually mentioned that yung experience niya in this work from home status or arrangement natin na pag dito ka sa bahay, it's just usually the waist up who's actually fixed, no? Pero minsan you can actually just do your shorts, no? So does that have an impact, for instance, in the way we will be purchasing certain fashion items, clothing, or will that be will there be changes in the way we construct our wardrobe, no? In dressing up, the new normal that we will be probably facing is yung wearing ng face mask, no? One possible impact of that, for instance, in our presentation is, are we going to be, will the females use lipstick, no? So how are we doing our makeup in such case, no? So if you're in the cosmetic business, that will be relevant to you. So yung these kinds of changes, you know. So the idea of the life world, no, so is actually for you to for brands or for products to come in and try to experience how people are managing or how people are living their everyday lives in this pandemic, no, or in this quarantine period. And for us to do that, no, is perhaps we should go to the context where these consumers are, so that we will have a better handle on how they are coping or how they will be moving forward after this pandemic. Yeah. So I think it will be better if you, Germaine, could ask some question, and I can probably relate it and answer some insights in relation to that, no? So kasi one challenge of doing micro is you have all these things happening, you know, and by asking the questions, that's how we can make better sense of what we are observing.
Eileen, you talked about reimagining.
Yes,
if we also try to, and also kasi we tackled in the talk of Peachy, the upscale market.
Yes, the upscale market.
You started out something on tackling the downscale market.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are already talking about some consumers who probably are so price sensitive.
Well, there will be a lot of consumers who will be price sensitive because, for one, if you will try to imagine yung consumers, yung expenditure, no. So if you have your expense line and you have your income line, kung nasa parang mid segment ka, halos magkadikit lang siya. Okay? And if there is a crisis that actually happens, yung all things going smoothly na yon might actually dip, creating a
You mentioned,
deficit that
yeah,
will
and
be hard for them to recover in terms of having the resources and money to go about it.
because you were mentioning in our talk, when we were discussing this topic. Okay, it was so interesting that you talked about the downscale market. Right now, their budgets are really so small, and
They're really so small, no?
how will they be coping in as far as, after the quarantine period is concerned? And that's why brands also need to help out in this.
Yes,
Provide provide I don't know, maybe come up with something. If you have a low price brand already, come up with something that is lower than low priced
yes.
brand,
So, or kaya yung
right?
mga payment schemes, no? Or baka other businesses will step in to help them out. For instance, usually yung mga lower income segment, pag kinukulang sila ng budget, for instance,
Right,
pre-COVID, walang COVID or walang pandemic, what they do is
right.
they turn to certain channels to get money that they can use to cover for certain expenses that cannot be accommodated by their regular income. So, ano-ano yung mga adjustments that they do? One thing is they go to the sanlaan. Okay, pumupunta na sasanla ng any items that they want, hikaw, singsing, ganyan. Merong isang klase ng sangla, yung sinasabi nila nagsasangla ng ATM. Pero paano mo naman, how are you going to do that? For instance, people are not even having salaries from their job. So what ATM can be pawned so that people can get money from this pagsasanla. So yung nagsasanla ng ATM na yon will get cash. Tapos yung certain percentage of that will be left to the person who's yung pinagpoponan. Some would resort to particular 5, 6. But
ang daming coping behaviors, ano?
Yeah, there are a lot of coping behaviors. And also remember, culturally, we are a tight-knit family in the Philippines, ano? That usually happens, yung talagang you will exhaust other mechanisms for getting money. Okay? If even yung mga close relations, close family mo are also in the red as you are. So meaning they do not have resources as much as you do. But for some na medyo relatively stable yung kanilang resource base enough to accommodate yung needs of the family, napaka-pronounced ng sharing culturally in the Philippines, no? So what do you mean by when you do some kind of sharing? So yung sharing economy na yon might happen in small things like yung ulam. So magluluto tayo, okay? So ipagluluto ko na rin yung family member ko or yung ibang household na malapit sa akin. So ibibigay ko na yan sa kanila. Okay? O kaya I have this, mag-grocery ako. Medyo may isasama na rin akong mga items para sa kanila. Okay? Or kailangan ng ganito, kung meron akong extra, ibibigay ko dun sa the relative ko na to. So that's why when we were talking about savings, no, if there is a likely impact on savings of this pandemic, because a lot of us will say na dapat pala nagtabi ako, or
emergency
nag-ipon
saving.
ako, I should have an emergency savings. But I don't think that's feasible to some income groups, no. It's a privilege that some people in probably mga C+ segment pataas would have a capacity to do. Pero for others, no, dahil others that will be very difficult because if they do have some extra money, no, so yung extra money na yan, what they will do sometimes is pumupunta pa siya para i-support or i-sustain ibang other family members or ibang relatives that are not earning as much, no. So this comes in the form of let's say sasagutin ng isang apo yung gamot ng isang grandparent niya in either side of the family. Okay?
So ang daming coping behaviors.
Oo, so those are the coping behaviors in I guess yung mga much lower income segments na which I am more very much familiar with, no. So
Oo.
on how
But also,
they
Eileen,
earn.
I want you to share kasi I know we had this discussion before
Mm-mm.
regarding the middle class naman.
Mm-mm.
Diba? You mentioned something about some markers of prosperity for the
Okay,
middle
oh.
class.
Okay,
Would you like to
so
share some insights on that?
okay. So 'di ba dun sa income categories natin, that's why I'm always saying na when we do consumer projecting, we have to be very mindful of kung sino ba yung consumer na pinag-uusapan natin. Because for one, they are really not homogeneous, no? So prestige markers or prestige
Prestige
items.
markers.
Oo. So these prestige markers or prestige items are consumption goods, no? So these are goods. It can be a bag, okay? Maaari hindi siya very luxury bag like Hermes or what, but it can be a branded item. Pwedeng sound system, okay? Pwedeng kotse yan. Pwedeng bahay yan, okay? Pwedeng way of spending. You do travel, okay? So you go Asian, you go local, you ride a plane, you take a day off, yan. So those are prestige markers that are really not part of some people's basic necessities, no? I mean, things that we can live with, but they sort of say something about who
About
we
the
are,
person.
about the person. Because as consumers, we are not only consuming products because they offer functional benefits to us, no? Or yung mga getting things done na yan. These are also symbolic. So symbolic meaning they convey certain identities through the products that we consume. And among this band of consumers that fall within yung sinasabi natin na middle class, ito yung middle class na paangat na. Okay? Stable jobs na relatively. They have...
Kung dati ang mga prestige markers niya would be siguro car ba yan? Car?
Yeah, car, oo. Minsan motor.
Oo.
Okay, minsan
motor,
bahay, maghuhulog ng
bahay.
bahayan. Oo.
Do you think that the prestige markers will become smaller in terms of repertoire?
Posible. Pero I am thinking right now that one possible impact is baka mag-rethink ang mga tao. Kaya nga we are pushing for this interpreting consumer na notion or idea. So when we say a consumer is interpreting, that means he or she is also reading the signs out there, no? Kung anumang mga signs ang accessible sa kanya. And people will read these signs differently according to what makes sense to them, no? So I might not have yung baka wala pa ako dun sa alternate yung thinking ko ba minsan nalilimit siya ng social location ko or ng social position ko, no? So I'm saying na with that interpreting consumer, there might be some revisions in how we value particular goods and particular things, no? The meanings that this have, no? So if we are saying that napaka-valuable na liquid tayo, no? Baka, and it's likely that we have expenditures that we can live with or we can live without, no? So meron tayong lifestyle threshold, di ba? So pag sinabi nating lifestyle threshold, okay, I cannot do without my brewed coffee. Pag ako hindi na nag-brewed coffee, talagang ibig sabihin...
I feel poor already.
Ay talagang wala na talaga. Talagang hirap na talaga ako. Ngayon, ano yung threshold na yon? All right? So, consumers will...
So, interesting to study that, ano?
Yeah, oo.
So, anyway,
ano yung threshold na yan, yes.
Oo. Kasi I'd also like to open the discussion across Peachy and Gino as well for some, but I just would like to recap some of the interesting points that you have shared today on a general basis. Very interesting. The role assignments and role definitions may change given the habits that we are accustomed to during this quarantine period, ano? So probably like you said, Tesco ba yan? Already
Tesco
changed its,
Malaysia.
Already anticipated or are already embracing this by providing guidelines for probably fathers out there who are now doing the shopping before hindi masyado, etc. Gino, no, for
I mean,
For retail.
Guide. Ano
Yeah.
yung parts ng
Oo.
chicken, di ba? I mean,
Oo, parang
napaka-mundane. These are mundane
nagkakaroon
things.
na ng differences in role definition,
Yeah, I
role
mean,
reversals, etc. Oh
just
my gosh. And
suddenly
therefore,
reminded me of some stories that suddenly fathers now have to do the grocery. So somebody sent this joke na instead of a shopping list, you give them pictures so that the fathers will
oh,
have a hard time
Oo,
with the grocery. Yeah,
yung
this
mga
happened.
ganyan. Ano.
Yeah, roles are changing. I'm telling you.
yeah, role. And therefore, parang there's gonna be, oh my gosh, I can imagine the shifting of brand choices and brand preferences here.
Di ba?
And
So,
and
how they
how
communicate
and
with
how brands need
people.
to program and do their targeting. Oh my gosh. So anyway, another interesting point that you mentioned is that the changes in the work arrangement. I think this was also touched on by Gino earlier. Na yung our work life and our home life are already merging together. So how do brands provide meaning in that kind of and be seamless in that kind of a merging environment already, right? So those are things that we can talk about. I'd like to also talk more about the downscale market, and gusto ko nang maiyak doon sa sinasabi ni Eileen about all of the coping behaviors and the budgeting and the limited resources that they have. I mean, talk about looking for meaning and your brand providing that meaning for these people. How will you now address this, right? So any thoughts kaya, any thought starters from any of you? How can brands think about
I think it's less about selling these days. I mean, yes, it's a business, but I think if you're a brand owner, your first priority should be how to help and be of service. I'll give you a real example, and I won't mention the brand. Okay, so what they did was they released a video, and the video was basically glorifying some worker who walked about 15, 20 kilometers to work. Nothing wrong. They had best intentions. Yes, great story. However, people responded negatively because they said, instead of spending the money on this video, why don't you just help the guy? And I thought that was really instructive. But I think people will appreciate help more than being sold to. I think it really starts from that. If you have sincere intentions and you have actions that help people, I would start from that. And I think that's in a way what
that's what you mean.
With marketing as we know it is gone. People don't need to hear that right now. They need to know, how are you helping me? How are you of service?
Yeah. Yes, Peachy.
I agree. I observe Philippine advertising from a distance, and some things really just marketing for that matter make me cringe, because there are brands, okay, let's not mention brands. There are brands that say, oh, we're helping and all that. We you might recognize, we did away with our marketing budget, such and such. But for those who really understand what marketing budgets are and where they go, you still see them leveraging on their donations, etc., etc. And for maybe to the untrained eye, it seems like, oh wow, but don't make a statement na lang na we're using our budgets to do something, and then you it just reeks of hypocrisy, and that's the last thing we need. And someone was
some brands are doing it on the back end, right? Mm-hmm.
I heard the word trust. You have to earn trust, because the brands that are trusted during the darkest times will be the brands that will shine and reap the rewards of authentic behavior. And I think I've seen so many I don't know. I just maybe I've been a practitioner too long to be able to see through the ruse, and that's the last thing we need. We need, tama si Gina, don't spend on the video. Like they say, these celebrities singing, imagine, is that what we really need at this time? Magbigay na lang kayo ng pera para makatulong. Kantahan nyo kami. Don't sing. For those who don't speak English, I mean Tagalog. Don't stop singing. Stop singing to us. Maybe you could just give us help.
I think arguably what a brand does now is probably more important than anything it will say. Actions first.
Just do it, ika nga.
And just do things, and people will remember you for what you do. Remember, they say you do, not say.
That's why a lot of
Mm.
influencers here and around the world are suddenly struggling because what do they do? Their whole business
Yeah.
is about a lifestyle, but people don't need to hear that right now. So they're now in this weird situation.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. That was a question in my mind as well. Parang influencer marketing, is that something that park muna, wag muna.
Or I think people are having an existential moment. They're basically thinking about what kind of influence do I want to stand for. So I think my
Mm.
prediction is it'll still be in the picture, but I think you will see some culling happening. The more purpose-oriented influencers will probably survive.
Go back to again meaning.
Yes.
Yeah, meaning.
Mm-mm.
Oo.
Yeah.
So we have to know that,
And
interpret that meaning.
actually that gives rise to the idea of the sustainability aspect, right? Sustainability, as we know it from the UN SDGs, would include poverty alleviation, right? So all the more we need to find ways to alleviate poverty, ano ba, education, continued education. Right now, the school system stopped, right? So how do we now how reimagine how to deliver the courses to our students, etc. So again,
Yes. Oo.
sustainability and reimagining so that we can provide meaning to brands. Okay.
I agree. I think we have
Mm-mm.
to not just reimagine, not just
Mm-mm.
reimagine says reference how it exists today. I think you have to imagine something that hasn't been imagined yet, and that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's very hard. That's the challenge.
Mm-mm.
That's
That's
the
a challenge.
challenge.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
And I think
I'd
that's
like
where, in order to do that, yung imagining, I think that's where we have to actually be more collaborative, no? So we need all these perspectives to come
that's
in,
a good
help
point.
us to make sense of what's happening, no? So not just among experts, no? And the real experts here are the people who are affected by what's going
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
else
Mm-mm.
would we go for information or for insights on how to help them cope or help address some of their most pressing concerns at this point, if not to directly ask them and understand the context that they are in. Kaya nga sinasabi natin, iba-iba the way people will be responding because they live in different contexts, life worlds, and settings.
Okay.
Those who are
I'd like allow me, dear panelists, to take some questions from our audience viewers. So I think like here on innovation, interesting point on innovation of failure. The question is, do you think brands and services who are not within the sector of health or wellness also should have prepared for this type of crisis? Do they really have an obligation to prepare for pandemics like COVID? It is a question about
yes. I
anticipating the crisis.
think if I may take the question, just because you're sardines doesn't mean that I have nothing to do with facial swabs or masks, right? I think we're looking at it too literally, and I think what the provocation was about, when we create innovations, at the heart of the provocation was, when we create innovations, are we really creating things people will need? And I guess that's the acid test for anyone who's going to create something or introduce a brand. Say, kapag ba magka-COVIDan tayo ulit, babibigyan tayo. I mean, you put yourself through that test. Or am I just a want? So I think that's the point of the provocation, is you really have to look at your value and are you addressing a human need? Because there's so many,
Always.
and that's why sardines are still in the relief pack
Mm.
and all that, right? Because it's a need. But don't take the question literally. It should be about, are you, if placed in a situation like this, is your offering to the public essential for you? And essential can be defined many ways. as we know, when people are having a hard time, the beauty industry booms, right? So are you really essential and I guess that's how I would like to reframe the provocation. Yeah, and yes, it is everyone's responsibility to be thinking about, and this term always is the unprecedented. Yeah, we have to be thinking about that.
I think also it will continue for as long as there's no vaccine
And
that's going to be around, di ba?
not just this. Imagine what we were preparing for in the past in the Philippines. What we were preparing for about 4 years ago. I was preparing for the big one. So there will always be something that we do not see that will happen, and until you acknowledge that there will be these incidents that will tectonic and world-shaking shifts. If we will always be caught flat-footed. So I think that my advice would be, you, as I said earlier, you have to have someone who will say, who will keep you honest and say, do people really need it? Let's put it through a certain test, an acid test, to say, before we launch this, do people really need this?
I think, yes, Eileen, would you like to add to that?
Sorry?
Yung here na lang, yung there are non-essential goods and services. What are the types of non-essential goods and services that are going to suffer the most during the normalization period?
Question.
Parang also, di ba? Yes.
I think there's some obvious ones. Obviously, travel is going to suffer, and tourism. I think that's safe to say. Anything with basically any big events or gatherings like sports, conventions, I think will definitely suffer. I think those are obvious. Beyond that, will remain to be seen. But those are probably the obvious aspects.
It's a race for any category or brand to find meaning in the lives of our customers, of people.
How you serve up your products, how you behave. I think it's not just the communication part, so to speak. I think it's basically finding your place in society. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but a brand is a member of society. So if it's going to be relevant, it has to offer something that's meaningful, useful to people in all aspects.
And it will depend on how that product or brand fits in the life world of the consumers, no? Kung gaano siya ka-essential doon. So if, for instance, lima sila na brands in that, kasi merong mga hierarchy tayo eh. Alin kaya yung ilalaglag ng consumers dyan sa mga brands na yan? So we really have to look at this from the perspective of our particular
always of the, I think this has been answered. How do you think consumers will behave as lockdown is lifted? Retail shopping, groceries, malling in general. Chaotic kaya yan? What's the first picture that we can imagine kaya?
I think it'll be like, if I was to describe it, it's going to be like the first day of class in a university. You want to attend every class, but it's just impossible and you're just overwhelmed. I think we will be in that state for a while. Because while the desire is there, the infrastructure is not going to allow us to do everything we want. So I think we're going to have to deal with that conflicted feeling for a while. And our excitement is just overwhelming.
Plus, also, I can imagine how it's going to be implemented. And I'm pretty sure there will be distancing pa rin that will happen, right? So a lot of the distancing methods need to be put in place in malls so that consumers will still be protected or secured, right?
Again, remember that this is something that most people have never gone through in their lifetime. So even our leaders are trying to figure out how to navigate this, and which means we're going to do a lot of learning on the fly.
Oh yeah, baka there will be some inventions that you can think about, product innovation types. All right. What can you say about the behaviors of consumers towards health and personal service? What values should be highlighted to consumers to entice them and to allay their fears? Allay their fears on kasi like for example, even barbershops nga daw, COVID, the COVID virus can be resident in the towels or the seats and everything. But if you think about it, all retail shops have seats, right? All retail, or even there will always be somewhere clothes, whatever metal materials, would be places where the virus can have been resident, will be resident in. But how do we ano nga ba, anticipate the behavior, and how will retail owners operate, anticipate this?
I think it's an interesting question because the thing that's been put into question nga is personal proximity. And yet we're asking for some kind of personal touch in a world that's discouraging that, right? I think for me, there's a beautiful word in our language that captures it. Yung pagiging mabusisi. I think that's what people will want to see. Because if I can't physically approach you or touch you, at least I can do is show you that I've really exerted every effort to take care of you. So I think we have to exert that extra level of pagiging mabusisi in everything we do as a business. And I think that applies to any business moving forward.
Yeah. Do you think there will be a relief fatigue scenario? Many brands may already, I think we mentioned this already, no?
Yeah.
People will get tired of some of the relief items.
Maybe not so
How do you
much.
think this will?
I think from past experience looking at other disasters and pandemics, I think you see donor fatigue from individual consumers. Not too sure if relief fatigue will be a thing, meaning I think people will still continue appreciating help and support moving forward, especially the lower SECs. It might be donor fatigue that might set in because we're so tired of the negativity, but this is going to be with us for a while, so I think we should treat it as a marathon, not a sprint.
And if I may add, ako yung parang concern ko dun sa mga relief goods na yan, ano. These are high salt content food items, no? So we actually have to see how this will impact yung rise ng particular lifestyle related disease, no? So like yung high blood because of yung impact ng salt, no? Kasi if you will be consuming the same processed food for a prolonged period of time, no? And I think those area na yon needs reinvention. Kasi ang supply chain natin pagdating sa mga crisis na ganito is yung mga relief goods na nakakanned, no? So yung mga fresh produce, there's basically very little ways by which we move this to consumers where they are needed. So yan yung mga hotspots for innovation in a crisis mode.
Can we move to because there are so many questions, but thank you so much for the questions, dear viewers and audience. This is about media. Okay, pre-COVID, for some social media platforms, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, there seem to be patterns, spikes in activity and usage depending on time of day or whether it's a weekend or weekday. Our experience of time and space have dramatically shifted because of the ECQ. Are you seeing observable shifts in how people are behaving vis-a-vis media consumption or social media activity? Is she asking about the potential future? Kasi right now, the experience is, ano ba experience ngayon? Parang
COVID,
flat ba? High flat?
Before COVID, there were what you call peak hours for social media.
Yes, right.
So generally the pattern is while people are in transit on the way to work, so 6 to 9.
Right.
And then there's another spike mid-afternoon around 3 o'clock. Then there will be another spike from 9 onwards. People
in the evening, right.
Before, pre-COVID, what we've observed is it's basically become an all-day thing because people are largely at home, right? And they're doing a combination of tuning into news updates plus trying to stay connected to people. So I think that's the big change. Will it continue moving forward? I think as people go out a little more, it might relax a little bit. So
right. I think they need to align it versus because I'm hearing about the modified community quarantine phase, right? So not everybody will be allowed to go out, I think. And therefore, as these get eased up until we reach no more quarantine, the pattern of the the media consumption may change accordingly, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Pichi, Gino, thanks for the insights daw according to Penroque.
Least we can do.
Yes. A few more before we end up this first webinar. Do you anticipate an emergence of a new breed of brand endorsers now that celebrity models have been proven to be mere mortals, just like everyone else who had been also affected by this pandemic? New models, new influencers, new brand ambassadors. I guess so, no?
I think
Depende on how they evolve themselves right now, right?
I think that's a small part of a bigger question.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the question is, go buddies, so what now? It's bigger than endorsers, bigger than celebrities. This is a consumer marketing inciting webinar, and we really have to ask, what's the role of what we do in industry?
Mm-mm.
Just to draw a parallel, I am in education, right? And when we were constrained by the government to move our courses online, the first impulse is to translate what we do face to face online, and that doesn't work because the environment has changed, the dynamics of online has changed. We are forcing a behavior that is not native to the channel. So my reflection was, okay, we are developing the program. We're not developing version 2. We're not from version 1 to version 2. We're developing version A. So I think you have to look at what is the version of marketing, communication, consumer that will emerge from this. So and then the question of which media, what's the role of influencer,
Right.
all follow. What is your role? What is your reason for being? And that's why the thought experiment, because we have to think about what gives us the reason to exist. You've seen, I think we're very, very lucky to be talking right now. We could have all, got infected and not have this conference and this, but we are blessed to be discussing it and saying, if we are to do it again, what version will we release to the public? Are we just going to do version 1.0, or 1.2, 1.4? I don't think it works that way. You have to think of the next iteration
Right.
of the industry.
Already.
It's so
Yeah.
apparent that perhaps, when I spoke about innovation failure, maybe even to a great extent, industry failure. So let's learn from it and let's create
Right.
the better version of ourselves.
Mm-mm. Before, I have two last questions. If you can articulate now, what are, because we're in the digital age, diba? We think about our customers in terms of persona, okay? What customer persona are you seeing right now? Okay, I'd like to get your thoughts on that. Because it's shifting, right? Because this is a structural change that happened. And therefore, if there is one persona that comes to mind, I'd like to give the floor to each one of you. What is that? So that our audience can think about around that persona of a customer that we are facing now and potentially in the near future. Anyone?
Would you like to go ahead?
Okay. Maybe not the best word to describe it, but it's the one that came up right
Or
away.
psyche, yeah.
I think we're going to start to see more fluid consumer psychographics. And when I say fluid, I mean traditionally kasi psychographics have been very strict and boxy. But you're this kind of person, you're another kind, as if you cannot be all these kinds of people depending on the moment. And I think we're going to start seeing more fluid psyches happening, meaning people will adjust to what happens at the moment. Because if there's anything that the pandemic has taught us, you have to be fluid. You cannot be boxed into one way of working, one way of thinking, one way of doing business. Everybody will be the same, whether you're a business person or a consumer. So I expect to see people be a little more fluid. And you can imagine that will have consequences on not just behavior, but even, you're right, brand preferences and brand loyalty. They will be fluid. Like,
So constantly changing.
yes.
I love that perspective, the fluidity of the customer. Very hard to box people in. Maybe another view to consider is, and I don't know if this is worth finding out, but I think it's how people have processed this. If people think, oh, it's one of those things, business as usual, people who will say, no, that was just a major disruption, but life goes on as usual. There's probably that kind of persona, or that kind of mindset, and there's probably someone who says, this is existential, my existent memento mori, a reflection on my mortality. And then that will change, and that person will change, and now he will evaluate people against what is really important, what is not important. I think that's a study I'd like to see. How did people respond to this? I think there will be many dimensions, and probably on top or with Gino's point of view on extremely fluid customer behavior.
So right now it's very fluid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
very fluid. We can't really, totally anticipate.
I think to Peachy's point, 2 months on, 1 month off. So the minute the off switch goes, again, people will change. So I think we're in for a while.
Yes, Eileen.
Yeah, and I think I'll stick with the idea of the interpreting consumer, that that people will be constantly thinking about what are the things that are happening around them and how this makes sense in their life world, and how they probably need to review, revise, reshape, adjust, or adapt to these particular circumstances that are confronting them right now, no? And I think this will be more context-based, yung consumer na to mean that that consumer will be adapting and adjusting as the situation takes place, as he or she is confronted by yung whatever it is that's happening right now, no? Kaya ano siya talaga, hindi mo talaga siya mababox, hindi mo siya ipuput into one parang archetype na isang category lang siya, because the borders are fluid. And,
that means therefore that we really need to constantly monitor our customers, the consumers, what are the narratives they are sharing in social media, I guess. Still observe if they have the opportunity, and see how all of these pan out in the future, no? Okay, I'd like to so much to ask. I actually didn't touch on my discussion guide, actually. This is such a rich conversation that we're having, and also with our audience. But before we end, I'd like to get your final, if there's one advice that you can give our viewers, our audience out there, in terms of understanding their customers so that they can prepare for them, what would be this advice that you can give them, Kaya?
Okay, maybe I'll kick off. I think while we acknowledge that the world will change, let's also not forget that the fundamental desires and needs of people don't really change over time. So even as we react and we adapt, let's also not overreact to the changes. Let's not forget that people will still want the same basic things. They will want to be cared for, they need comfort, they need to be entertained, they need to be together with other people. I think those things will remain. They will just be expressed in a different context. but let's not overreact to a pandemic.
Mhm. Needs will remain the same.
Again,
Maybe highlighted lang yung ibang needs more now than before.
as I said earlier, 9/11 changed air travel forever, but it didn't stop people from traveling. I think we should take comfort from that.
Yes, agree. Any other advice? How can they do their insighting? What are the things that they need to stay tuned into so that they can understand their customers more these days?
Can I go?
Yeah.
I think for brands, you should be with your consumers, no? So you have familiarity or experience how they are experiencing the situation dun sa context nila, no? And find out where your brand is located in that whole experience, no? So that you will be able to see how you are relevant and how you can be more relevant because you have this deep understanding that's coming from an insider of that life world or that context. So that's
understand their pains right now, I guess. No, their pains and still their aspirations, which is what we generally look for and find out.
I think I agree more than ever. Knowing your customer intimately will see you through. Because if you are relying on the assumptions that you made pre-COVID, I don't think that is going to be very helpful. As we have made the point that this has changed us, and I agree with Gino. Let's not overreact. Let's not panic. Let's just be very mindful that and not make some. I know someone told me once. I think it's Mark Maley. He said, "Assumption is the enemy of empathy." So be very, very.
Oh, that's very nice.
Very wary about the assumptions we make. We may have gotten away with it in the past, but I don't think it's going to do us any favors making these assumptions about how our. That's why I'm very guarded in the way I respond. I'm saying these are just signals, and they're not predictive or they're not prescriptive. This is one venue to get information and inspiration, and I think you should go out and understand them more when you can go out, okay, and wear a mask.
Or just listen in social media.
Find a way.
What are being shared in social media. All right. Yes. Well, time flew by fast. Okay. I would like to thank all of you for sharing your invaluable time, insights, and experiences. And thank you for taking care of the questions of our audience. Before we end, I'd like to encourage everyone. I think you're seeing a QR code. Please, please answer our evaluation form so that we can make our e-panel webinars more meaningful and much better as we move along. This is a series. This is the first of 5 series that we are planning. Please wait for some announcements on our next e-panel webinars. So I'd like to end this webinar with an excerpt from this poem written in 1869, resurrected during the 1919 pandemic, which seems appropriate and relevant to us again this time. And it goes, and people stayed at home and read books and listened, and they rested. And they did exercises and made art and played and learned new ways of being and stopped and listened more deeply. Some meditated, someone prayed, someone met their shadow, and people began to think differently. And people healed, and the earth also began to heal. And when the danger ended, People found themselves and made new choices and dreamed of new visions and created new ways of living and completely healed the earth just as they were healed. Our customers may still be currently finding themselves in the midst of this quarantine period. As they heal, may we find ways to help them in the process. As they heal, hope our brands become more meaningful in their lives. Let's continue to understand and anticipate their needs as they heal. So thank you everyone for joining our e-panel webinar. Join us again. We will make the announcement soon. I'm your moderator, Germaine Reyes, along with our esteemed panel of members, Gino, Peachy, Eileen, and our partner Future Proof. This is Germaine Reyes at your service, signing off. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.